Welcome to Clued in Mystery. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brooke, and we both love mystery.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Sarah. Today we're taking on another Golden Age mystery author.
That's right. We are speaking about, I don't know if she would be considered Golden Age. She started publishing a little before the Golden Age, but we are speaking about Mary Roberts Rinehart, who, until you suggested her, quite honestly, was unknown to me.
Exactly. She is sometimes coined the American Agatha Christie, but she has fallen into rather obscurity, hasn't she?
She has. I'll give a little bio and then we can talk a little bit about why that might be, Brooke. Mary Roberts was born in 1876 in what is now Pittsburgh. She was the eldest of two daughters in a middle class household. She met Dr. Reinhardt, whose surname she adopted when they married, while she was working as a nurse at the Pittsburgh Homeopathic Hospital. Mary began writing seriously after she married, thinking that she might supplement her husband's income. They had three young boys, and she looked after running much of the household and part of his medical practice, even though they had some domestic help, as was common at the time. After the Reinhardts lost thousands of dollars in a stock market crash, Mary began submitting writing to local publications, focusing largely on short stories and poetry. In 1907, her first novel, The Circular Staircase, was published serially before being issued as a book and would go on to sell over 1 million copies during her lifetime. In 1915, during the First World War, Mary's writing was by now familiar to many readers in the US, and she went to the front to report for Saturday Evening Post. While she was there, she was granted unusual access to interview the Belgian king and the English queen. She returned overseas again to report on what was going on and was in Paris when the war ended. She also traveled extensively within the US, keeping homes in multiple states. After her husband died in 1932, she remained living in Washington, where they had moved when he had been appointed to a high profile government role. She also summered in Bar Harbor, Maine, and in 1947 was involved in a violent incident when her gardener of 25 years attacked her with a knife. That same year, she revealed that she had breast cancer, which was a disclosure that was relatively rare for the time, but she felt was necessary because of her profile. Despite suffering ill health throughout her life, Mary lived until 82 and died in 1956 in New York, where she was living at the time. During her lifetime and writing career, she published many short stories and novels. A lot of her work was adapted for plays as well, and some of them were quite successful. So, Brooke, I look forward to speaking with you a little bit more about her.
Yes, Sarah, thank you for that summary of her life. Well, like I said at the top, she's sometimes referred to as the American Agatha Christie. And I think that they have some similarities, but a lot of differences too. On the one hand, they're both mothers. They both enjoy the outdoors a lot. They were the breadwinners of their family, writing their stories. But I think that Mary Roberts Rinehart also had this kind of tragic and gritty life that I think shines through in her stories in the way that some of the things that happen to her characters.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, her early life, her dad, he invented a lot of things, and was never really successful in his inventions, even though he invented things that, I read something about he invented like the self-winding bobbin for sewing machines, but wasn't successful in, he either didn't patent it soon enough or whatever it was, he did not end up being credited with that. And so did not benefit from that invention, which now appears on every sewing machine.
Yes, he was just a tragic figure, and I think that that's kind of set the tone for what was a lot of tragedies that happened in her life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you about your earlier comment about the parallels to Agatha Christie's life. She was prolific, um,
Hmm.
in the same way that Agatha was. They both worked in a hospital and drew on that experience in their writing.
Right.
So we see that, her medical knowledge, I think, is something that she draws on. And her first book, the circular staircase, features an older woman sleuth, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. Um, and unfortunately, I don't think she wrote any more featuring that character, but she could have easily been someone that she built a series around. Unlike Christie, she did not have a signature detective or a signature sleuth, whereas Christie had a few. We've talked about them.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sarah. And I think part of why her work and her name get lost because she didn't build any series. She didn't build any, as you said, signature sleuth, this recurring character that people could kind of hold on to. I don't know how much it played into the fact that she was really writing serials. I mean, a lot of her stories read, this week I'm reading The Circular
Hmm.
Staircase, and they read almost like a soap opera or, a telenovela where some big amazing thing happens. You've got this cliffhanger that okay, readers would have had to wait a day or a week. I'm not sure the timing of her serialization, but they're definitely set up that way. And I don't know if that how much that played into the fact that she wasn't always necessarily set out to write a novel. She was writing these serialized stories that were very lucrative, and then she would package them. And that's something she did too, is repackaging things. The Circular
Hmm.
Staircase became The Bat, became a play. She definitely had her finger on how to continue to use her intellectual property to continue to make money.
Definitely. And at the time, she was incredibly popular, right? Like she did sell a lot of her writing. And The Bat, when it was a stage production, um, it was in New York, it was in London for weeks, right?
Mhm.
Years, in fact. Um, and so, incredibly popular. But yeah, the story for The Bat is very heavily inspired by The Circular Staircase.
Yes, it's nearly the same story. And it's important to note that while in her story, the bat is the bad guy, kind of this burglar, uh, it did morph into and end up inspiring Batman from DC Comics.
I saw that as well, and while readers may not be necessarily familiar with her work, they are familiar with her legacy. So
Yes.
Batman is an example. She's credited with the "had I but known" style of writing, where we see this in The Circular Staircase, um, where she ends a chapter by saying, "Had I known, uh, you know, that moving into this house would have caused the things that it did, I wouldn't have done that." Right.
Hmm.
And that goes back to what you were saying about it kind of feeling like a soap opera, because she did those kind of cliffhangers. Um, I think because it was originally serialized, but really is really credited with that device in writing.
Yes, yes. And we see it, it's very popular in contemporary thrillers. One of my favorite thriller authors that I mention a lot is Ruth Ware, and she heavily uses that narrative device. Even if readers don't recognize the name Mary Roberts Rinehart, they do enjoy some of the style and tropes that she popularized.
So she was in her 30s when she started writing, or started her writing started to be published. She'd been married by that time for several years. She had to work, essentially. In the biographies that I read, talks about her having to balance this role of being a mother with the role of being an author and the role of being a wife, and a lot of the struggles that I think people who are writing now still experience. Right, she was managing her husband's medical practice, managing the household, and she didn't have this life of luxury.
I think it's so relatable to uh, the way authors continue to live because it's very much what many of us who our writing these days experience, where you're juggling multiple roles and essentially multiple jobs. And so that's really an interesting. I hadn't come across that in reading about her, Sarah.
Another legacy that she's credited with is the butler did it trope, which, so I didn't read the story that's associated with that. But I thought that that was um, an interesting thing. She also, because she was writing and was popular at a time when film was really just emerging, it was the early days of cinema, a lot of her stories were adapted for movies.
And I believe she was very much involved in writing the adaptations, which I read she didn't really love because she'd already written that story and now she was rewriting that story. But it was had to be very lucrative and a great way to continue her career. She didn't just stay in one lane either. She wrote mystery, romance, and even social novels. And there again, that could be a reason why her name has sort of become watered down because she was spread a little bit thinner than somebody who was, just writing detective fiction.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And even, in the circular staircase, for example, you see definitely there's mystery, but there's also that romance, and you can see that those threads in that work.
I don't think she was particularly happy to be known as a detective fiction author either. I read that she really would have rather be remembered for her commentaries on, societal issues
Hmm.
and some of her more serious articles. And in that way, it reminded me of Arthur Conan Doyle because we know he wasn't exactly thrilled with his legacy being mysteries either.
I don't know if she really liked detective fiction, because her earlier poems, the ones that were first published, some of them were satirical takes on detective fiction, which I think
Oh,
is
that's so
is interesting.
interesting.
Hmm.
And kind of plays into this uh, trope that she is credited with popularizing, which is "Had I But Known," because that can become very satirical. Yeah, and I mean, I think we see that, right? So that's super interesting that she maybe had a little dislike for the genre, but knew that it was a popular one to write in.
I think maybe her reluctance to write detective fiction um, is possibly why she didn't have a single detective sleuth, right? Even though she had a few stories that featured this older woman sleuth that were adaptations of the circular staircase. I don't think you could say that there was a series featuring that character. When she died, her papers were given to the University of Pittsburgh, and they are available digitally. Uh, I spent a little bit of time looking through them. They are really interesting. You can see her correspondence with Ellery Queen, which I thought was really interesting. So Ellery Queen contacts her and asks, do you have any stories that we could publish, anything more featuring Tish, which is a character that she had published a few stories in the Saturday Evening Post. Um, and, they have a little exchange about that. Um, it was just really interesting to kind of see some of her personality come through in these letters. I can't remember which of the cousins it was that was writing to her. Well, you also get a glimpse into Ellery Queen's personality as well.
Oh, that's fantastic, Sarah. I think that it speaks to her both her popularity and her skill because Ellery Queen, is not going to just reach out to anyone in the mystery space. So I think that says a lot and is a big compliment for Rinehart.
When she died, her books had sold over 10 million copies. So, you know, I mean, that's a lot. She would have been at the time of her death quite comfortable, despite the early portion of her life.
Exactly. She was also honored with a special Edgar Award by the Mystery Writers of America in 1954, so just shortly before she passed away. And this award is given to recognize lifetime achievements and contributions to authors.
And so I think that definitely makes her worth us discussing, because of the legacy that her writing has left, even if it's not something that is really familiar with readers. But a lot of her works are available on Project Gutenberg, or audio versions are available for free through LibriVox. And that's how I listened to The Circular Staircase and The Window at the White Cat. Um, Both of those were great productions. So, what did you think about her writing, Brooke?
There were things I really liked about it, and then there were things that I didn't care for so much. I honestly am kind of a sucker for the had I been known uh, idea. And I think once you realize what you're reading, you're going to see it everywhere. It's this sense of this narrator's regret that I wish I would have known then what I know now. And we see it all over the place. And I'm a big sucker for that. I enjoy that. But similarly to the way that we discussed that the Seven Dials mystery by Agatha Christie got rather wild, I feel like we have that happening in these books too, where, it's just one tragedy after another that gets to feel a little bit wild. However, again, once you think about the fact that these were written to be serialized, there really has to be a big adventure in each and every one of them to keep readers going. So I can appreciate it. What about you, Sarah?
I really liked The Circular Staircase. There's a lot that goes on in it. And one of the things that I read about her is that, she was never formally trained as a writer. She was a voracious reader and was trying to mimic the styles that were popular at the time. So Anna Catherine Green would have been really popular. And in fact, when she compiled some of her writing and wanted to see if she could get it published as a book, she sent it to Anna Catherine Green's publisher. I'm assuming because she really respected Anna Catherine Green. Um, and so I think, if we were to read some of her later work, we might see a bit of an evolution in her writing became, um, as she figured out how to do it. But I mean, The Circular Staircase was popular right off the bat, so you know, audiences responded well to it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought she was really funny.
She is really funny. And her take on that older sleuth character that you mentioned is really cute and really funny. I enjoyed her very much.
Yeah. Um, but as is true with a lot of authors from that time, there are some terms and phrases and the way some characters are treated, because of their race or their background, in ways that just we wouldn't see in books today.
Mhm.
And so if you are going to read her, just be aware.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. You run into it in that era of writing. It's certainly not just Reinhardt, but just I think that's a great thing to be aware of if you're going to pick up one of these stories. The Circular Staircase might be a fun read along to do with our Chronicle subscribers.
I think that's a great idea, Brooke. And so, yeah, let's do that.
We'll get that planned. So, listeners, today we have a question for you. Prior to this episode, were you aware that Batman was inspired by a Mary Roberts Rinehart book? Let us know. You can reach out to us by email or social media, and we want to know if this is something you are aware of before. But thank you for joining us today on Clued in Mystery. I'm Brooke.
And I'm Sarah, and we both love mystery. Clued in Mystery is written and produced by Brooke Peterson and Sarah M. Stephen. Music is by Shane Ivers. If you liked what you heard, please consider telling a friend, leaving a review, or subscribing with your favorite podcast listening app. Visit our website to sign up for our newsletter, The Clued In Chronicle, and get mystery news, podcast updates, and bonus episodes. We're on social media at Clued In Mystery.